I'm Adrian Sandoval,
And I'm Lamont Williams.
and we are playing Dread. We are back after a very long hiatus that neither me nor Lamont wanted, but life gets busy. We are ready to jump back into this podcast, and I am very excited because this is looking like it's going to be an amazing year for a horror. Like, so many different horror franchises are getting revitalized. There's some really cool stuff happening in the indie scene right now. And we're mostly going to be talking about the legacy of these games more than those games themselves. And likewise, we just had a major legacy release this month that we're recording. This is the month of June. DooM, The Dark Ages, the third entry in the DooM reboot series that started with the 2016 game DooM. I really like those rebooted games. I don't know. Have you played any of the newer DooM games?
So, Adrian, I was just about to say that I have dropped the ball and I have not played any of them, but I have heard nothing but good things. So it's kind of been on my to-do list. And when we talked about doing this episode, the Doom episode, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I've got some homework to do." And I was doing some traveling recently, so I bought myself a Legion Go, and I loaded the first Doom on there because it was on Game Pass, and I was like, "This is happening." Claire Obscure happened. Expedition 33 became my entire life, and I did not play as much Doom as I was supposed to play.
As I'm like currently waiting for Claire Obscure to come in the mail, at least the physical PlayStation edition, though it's coming at a time when I'll actually have space to play it. So I'm excited to play that for sure. I will say I did play through a lot more of the original Doom than I ever did as a kid, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. I was talking about Doom 2016, which currently, as of, again, recording this while the Steam summer sale is going, Doom 2016 is $4 right now. Uh, I will say, Ma, if you haven't played it, that 2016 reboot's very good. We're not talking about the 26 reboot today, but I will say, if you haven't played it yet, it's $4 right now. Go pick it up. It's amazing.
You just awakened a weird memory of mine. I I think I own Final Doom for the original PlayStation. I think I know where the disc is.
You should see. You should have played Final Doom for this podcast. I played a lot of Doom for this podcast. We're gonna get into it in just a second, but all of this is to say, Doom has a very storied legacy. We're gonna talk a little bit about that legacy today. We're not gonna be talking about Doom 2016. We might talk a little bit about Doom 2 and Doom 3. We're gonna play this one a little bit by ear, but we're mostly talking about that original 1993 release. It's a little muddy for me. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. But Lamont, so you just mentioned you think you might own the PlayStation port of Final Doom, which I hear is very good. This is a good transition, though, for me to ask you the question I always ask at the beginning of these, which is, what was your first experience with Doom, if you can remember it? Again, whenever we talk about one of these older games that kind of predates our friendship, I'm always like the most curious to hear your response to this, because usually aren't things that we've talked about before.
So I have a weird experience when it comes to a lot of these earlier PC games. So PC gaming was weird for me because I had access to PCs pretty early. My aunt worked at a power plant, and she would bring home PCs. We had, you know, old DOS based computers. I learned how to run games from floppy disk and was playing stuff like that. I had early Windows, but I, at the same time was not working with top of the line PC anything. So my first experience with Doom, as well as Hexen, I think it was at my friend's house. My friend Keith, his dad, I think had a government job of some sort, had this amazing computer, and I remember him booting up Doom. I stayed the night, and it was amazing. It was my first real, like, more mature game, and I was like, this is insane. And like he had it all. Like, he had the sound blaster, he had like just everything was super cool, and I was like, I need more of this. It really is the thing that awoken like my PC gamer like experience. And then I talked my parents into getting me a PC, and they're like, we have a PC at home. And I remember trying to like play like the itchy and scratchy game, and my computer could not run it. It could not run the game. It did not have the sound drivers. And it really was like that kind of disappointment that pushed me ultimately back to consoles.
It's really funny. And I mean, number one, I really love that like your first like real taste of PC gaming and enough to like get you like seriously interested if it had worked out was Doom. That feels so appropriate for our age group. And you also mentioned Hexen as well, which is on the Doom engine. Do you remember like around what year this might have been?
No, no, I don't. I would have to do a little research.
Okay, 'cause I'm like looking at Hexen's wiki right now. I didn't prepare to research Hexen. Sequel to Heretic from Raven Software, although people did work on it. John Romero was a producer on Hexen. Sequel to Heretic came out in 1995, so 2 years after
You
Doom.
know what? I can kind of give an idea of that because I was born in 85, and then we were still in Okinawa for a couple of years after that. So I think we came back in 92 or 93. So it would have had to have been probably 94 or 95.
And again, Hexen came out October 30th, 1995, if Wikipedia is to be believed. So I'm guessing probably around the time Hexen came out. I think that's super interesting just because like I feel like that aligns so well with so many different people's perspectives and stories on Doom. Now I say that because the answer is a little bit different for me. It's funny because I tend to have a fairly good memory about like the first time that I encountered games or, where I was when a certain game came out and when I actually played it. Cause I don't, it's still true to this day. I don't usually get to play games until like they're like a year or two out. The thing about Doom that's interesting, cause I was always more of a console kid myself, but I did have a PC fairly early. I had a PC, I would say, earlier than a lot of my friends and people. I was on the internet particularly early. The thing is that, like, I don't really remember a time before Doom. Doom has just kind of always been for perspective, I was born in 1984. Like, I don't have memory of the video game crash or anything like that. Video games have just kind of always been a part of my life. I was growing up during the Nintendo boom, and I had a Nintendo, and then I moved to Delaware, and while I was in Delaware, my family there had a PC. And, I couldn't actually tell you if I played Doom on PC first or if I played one of its many console ports that we'll talk about in a little bit. What I can say is that I was definitely a purveyor of shareware at the time. Is this the moment of the show where we have to explain what shareware is?
Think we might.
For certain people. Yeah, there might be some listeners out there. Now, I was going to get into this a little bit when we go through Doom's development history, but the idea is that a developer would release what was called shareware, which would essentially be a demo, but think of much more fuller experience than what you picture like a demo you might download off of Steam Next Fest or whatever. The shareware for Doom was an episode, as they were called, which was like a set of like 8 levels that you got to play. So I actually did before this podcast play through the first episode of Doom 1, like literally today as of recording. I played through the first episode. I'd say it took me about 2.5 hours maybe. And this is, number one, I played the game before, but also I was playing it on a higher difficulty setting than I might normally. So it's shareware's pretty substantial demo. And then you would, very analog in a time before there was wide scale internet. Internet was the thing, but it wasn't wide scale. You would send a check or money order, usually to someone's house, Not in the case of Doom. It was a much bigger operation by that point. But you would send a check or money order to the company, and then they would send you the box and the instructions and all of the other things. And for Doom's case, you got essentially two more episodes of levels. But yeah, I don't know. I can tell you that I definitely played the prior game, Wolfenstein 3D, as shareware before playing any of the console ports. And I can tell you that I played It's Often Forgot About, most people don't talk about it, predecessor to Wolfenstein 3D, Catacombs 3D, off of a shareware disc. And I have much better memory of playing those games on PC. And I definitely did play Doom on PC sometime in the early 90s. And it was an experience. I will say that I was very bad at those games. Like all of the first person shooters that were coming out, and this would be true for a very long time, even with the console ports and such. I didn't understand how to play them. I died very quickly in most of those games. Like, it felt like enemies could do like half your health worth of damage and then you would just be dead and you would have to save scrum like every tiny bit, or you just played in god mode and you just forgot about it and just had a good time blasting things and didn't worry about the difficulty. I can say in like more recent playthroughs that I did for this podcast, both playing all the way through the original Doom, I believe the first episode and a little bit more of Doom 2, and again, all of Doom episode 1 on ultra violence, I can now say, yes, I get it. I know how to play these games. They are super fun. The original Doom absolutely is a masterclass in level design, all things that we're going to talk about today. But I cannot honestly tell you much about when I actually first experienced it. As far as I remember, Doom has just always been a thing. There was always a Super Nintendo port that wasn't great. There was a 32X port that I would play much later in my life, but I remember reading video game magazines that made fun of that port quite a bit before actually getting to experience it for myself. Uh, yeah, I guess you could say that Doom is eternal.
I see what you did there.
I'm glad someone did. Anyway, I feel a little intimidated talking about the history of Doom development. Maybe not intimidated, it's not the right word. Just this is a story that's been told ad nauseum so many different times. There are a million YouTube videos. There is an amazing, amazing book called Masters of Doom that I highly recommend everyone read. It is at the intersection of a accurate depiction of the history of the development of the game, as well as also being a really fun and entertaining read. Lamont, we didn't get the opportunity for you to get my copy of the book, but I would still highly recommend that you read it. It's a very, very fun, very interesting read, and I'm going to be pulling a lot from my memory of the stories from the book as we kind of delve into the development history. But again, this is stuff that's been talked about a lot. John Romero, famous game designer on Doom, just released their own book, a biography on the development of Doom. It's called Doom Guy, which I also hear is very good, but I haven't read it yet. So, Lamont, we've talked a lot in this podcast about like the development histories and stories of people. And it's always like this like really fascinating look at like different people's personalities and the things that inspired them as creators. And I feel like Doom is a really interesting one, or just the id Software, not even Doom, just id Software is a really fascinating one because it is one of those things that the world would look so different if only a couple of things were shifted around, if only a couple of things changed. Like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, especially those two games, if any of those people hadn't been there, I'm not just talking about John Romero, I'm talking about John Carmack, Adrian Carmack, Sandy Peterson, Tom Hall, like anything had shifted. The wind had gone a little bit differently. Like we wouldn't just have Doom and we wouldn't just have id Software. Like the world would look different.
Oh my god, yeah, absolutely.
Like when Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington were working at Microsoft, a big part of their inspiration to leave Microsoft and create Valve was because they played Doom. Can you imagine now a world without Valve? Can you imagine a world without Steam?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like,
It might be a better world, honestly.
I can't argue
In
with
some
that.
ways, it might be a better world, but also we wouldn't have Doom. So would it really, truly be a better world? But anyway, I don't know. It's just like, and again, the story of id Software really is just about like all of these people plus a couple of more being in the right place at the right time. So talked a little bit about shareware before, but another thing that was actually really popular, if you can imagine this, Lamont, was subscription-based services.
Yes. So I know this is gonna be kind of a tangent episode, but I
Oh no, this
remember
is
those
fine.
days.
I want to hear this.
So I remember those days because I remember like I was that kid that like would go into like different stores, different gaming stores, stuff like that, and I would see the magazines that were sealed that had like the software in it, and I was like, I just wanna, I just wanna know what's on the disc. I need to experience it, and like I knew that these were things that existed. I knew that like there were subscriptions for it, and I could not get my family to subscribe to anything.
Yeah, no, certainly. When we talked about like shareware games, so many of those you could buy them at Walmart for like $5. Like anybody could just like take a bunch of shareware software, throw it on a disc, and then like have like a fly by night company and sell them at Walmart. You could also just, package a bunch of them on a disc that was then included on your computer game magazine because again, pre-internet or at least like the early internet when not a lot of people were on it, most fandoms and most fandom interest were served by magazines. So you would just have like magazines that would have these discs included. Absolutely. But Softdisk is actually a little bit different from that because Softdisk was a service that just gave you a disc. So you would pay a monthly subscription, and Softdisk every month would send you a disc that they called magazettes, according to Wikipedia. I'm looking at Wikipedia for this because this isn't something I remember specifically from the Doom book. Magazettes that were essentially just like a bunch of software on a disc that you would receive every month. Some of which would be like shareware, some of which would just be like original programs, and some of those programs were in fact video games. So what Softdisk was doing essentially is that they had a whole department that was just for making video games, and a lot of the people who will eventually go on to work at Doom end up at Softdisk. And this is like pretty surprising because number one, Softdisk is a software company that was headquartered in Shreveport, Louisiana. Yeah, right. Imagine like computer anything being in Louisiana today. But computers were like a really big business, and could be found all over the United States before they kind of all shifted over to California. And all of the, none of the developers, I believe, maybe one or two, were stationed in Shreveport. Like most of them came from other places in the United States. The Masters of Doom book does a really good job of kind of telling the story, at least of how the two Johns kind of both end up at Shreveport at the same time. But again, like anything in their lives could have like shifted. And John Carmack in particular was really on the fence about coming to this place. It took some convincing and also some raising some money to, work at this company. But again, like that could have not happened, but it did. And individuals were I mean, number one, they're all Gen Xers, right? They all seem to have like a shared love of Dungeons and Dragons, metal music, Diet Coke, apparently, if we go by the story from Masters of Doom. John Romero, John Carmack, Tom Hall, Adrian Carmack, all of these people are definitely like their own individual personalities, but they do have a lot of shared interests. So we have like these people coming together being friends. My personal favorite part of this story, though, is really how they get started with this idea of like maybe we should just do this on our own. We don't really need this like soft disk thing, which is that they were also all big fans of Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yes.
And they wanted to make games like it. The problem is that although the NES was very good at being able to have a camera, like something that like follows the player so that you can have like a very smooth scrolling world, that was not something that a full computer could do very easily. Until John Carmack figured out how to do it, because that's the kind of person John Carmack was. John Carmack was like, I can probably figure this out if I think it through, and comes up with a tech that I'm not going to try to give a layman's explanation of here, adaptive tile refresh, which allows them to do a scrolling camera. So they're all like, oh, this is super cool. We should just make Super Mario Brothers 3 on a computer. But they didn't want to like let Soft Disk know that they had come up with this capability. They wanted to do something on their own. So what they do, Tom Hall from Soft Disk had a cabin, a summer cabin, where under the cover of night, they came in, they took all of the computers, or at least the computers that they worked on, at Soft Disk, took them overnight, and over that weekend just jammed out a demo of Super Mario Brothers 3, and then brought all the computers back before anyone knew that they were gone.
Honestly, I respect that. I feel like when we were young game design students, that would have been right in our same kind of wheelhouse.
Oh no, that's absolutely the kind of thing that I probably would have done. But I will link to the demo. It's on the Internet Archive. John Romero found it. Or at least a video of it anyway. Will be on the Internet Archive. You can see this for yourself. And if you have any familiarity with Super Mario Brothers, you're gonna look at that and be like, "Well, that doesn't look that great." But I'm here to tell you, if you have ever played any of the earlier ports of NES games to PC, this is a godsend. Like, this is incredible that they were able to do this. Number one, just again, the smooth scrolling camera, but like the physics look right. Like, for the most part, it looks like Super Mario Brothers 3. The sound isn't great, but let's be honest, no sound on PC at that point, whether you had a sound blaster or not, was very good. PC games just kind of sounded like that, unfortunately. But, they sent this demo over to Nintendo, and Nintendo sent them mail back that said, thanks, but no thanks. John Romero gets in touch, or I should say Scott Miller gets in touch with John Romero and says, hey, I'm a fan of your work, really like the stuff that you're doing at Softdisk. I'm starting a company called Apogee. We want to do shareware games, and they apply this shareware tech to id's first real big hit, which is the Commander Keen series, a platforming series about a kid that kind of, in my mind, it's not brought up in the DooM book, but kind of feels vaguely Calvin and Hobbes inspired, specifically Spaceman Spiff inspired. Those games are okay. Lamont, you ever play a Commander Keen game?
I was gonna say I've never played a Commander Keen game before.
Yeah, they're not as tight in terms of physics or level design in the way that Super Mario is. This is my opinion. I have a feeling that there might be some Commander Keen fans out there who might get angry at me, but it's fine. And, we can fast forward a little bit, but like part of, talking about John Carmack being able to figure out the scrolling camera, like this is again something that John Carmack is really good at doing is solving problems. And they had already started working on a fast-ish 3D engine, or at least like a fake-ish 3D engine, with a game called Hover Tank 3D. So yeah, there's another first-person game that often doesn't get mentioned when people talk about DooM. That's Hover Tank 3D. I will say Hover Tank 3D, there's no textures on any of the walls. You are playing as a tank and you're not walking as a human being. It feels like you're controlling a tank. So, whether or not you consider that a first person shooter or even the first person shooter. But just again, being able to get a computer to render 3D walls or something resembling 3D space and having it go at like at least 30 frames per second if you have a good enough PC was an accomplishment. It was a huge, huge accomplishment. And it was just something that John Carmack continued to iterate on, first for Hover Tank 3D, then for Catacombs 3D, And then eventually they would leave soft disk and just publish directly with Apogee with Wolfenstein 3D. And like that's the thing that kind of like really blows open the doors. So and again, I'm going to throw it back to you, Lamont. This isn't a Wolfenstein podcast, although I guess Wolfenstein does kind of have like a little bit of horror elements to it. You had mentioned like, first really like engaging with PC games was at your friend's Keith house playing Hexen and Doom. Have you ever played or did you ever get introduced to Wolfenstein at any point before that?
You know what? I'm almost positive that I also played Wolfenstein there.
I would make sense, absolutely. Like I feel like if you have like the Doom shareware discs and such, you probably have Wolfenstein hanging around somewhere.
Yeah, because like Wolfenstein's another one of those games that like I don't remember the first time that I played it, but I know it. It feels like I've always had it like around. It's existed since like my memories of gaming has existed, but I feel like Doom and Wolfenstein, those all happened around the same time in my
Yeah,
brain.
no, like that's basically what I was saying before earlier, that it's like for my brain, even though like I was around, I was a child, but like I was around for when these games like released, and obviously they released in a particular order. But I think because PC games and PC gaming was so aimed at 20 to 30-year-olds at the time, I feel like, anybody who was younger than that who just kind of had like a vague interest in gaming, like all of these things just kind of like happened at the same time. But Wolfenstein 3D is really what busts the doors open. I'm like looking here at like sales numbers and such, 250,000 copies by the end of 1995. Lots of rewards and everything, and also just the fact that that game is visually striking, and also it's like super duper gory. This is a game about blasting Nazis, and it gets like really off the wall. I mentioned that like it does kind of have like a vague horror theme, by the time you're like in the later stages or the later episodes that you could purchase, like you're fighting Nazi zombies with chain guns grafted to their chest, and eventually a mecha Hitler. Hitler's just like decapitated head attached to a jaw, in a jar, on this like walking battle tank. Like it's just a super wild, crazy game. Also one that didn't really have a lot of controversy that I remember, at least not a contemporary controversy. Some of the controversy for these games might come a little bit later, but like when they released, I don't really remember this game like causing that much of an uproar in the same way that, say, Mortal Kombat did, right?
Gosh, no, absolutely not. Not in my memory.
But like, the big thing with Wolfenstein really is just that it's a technical marvel. I'm gonna say again, like, and this might be controversial, like as a kid. And when I say a kid, by this point, I mean like a teenager going into my 20s who has played a lot of Wolfenstein, has played a lot of Doom, but mostly in spurts, still not good enough at any of these games to actually be able to beat it. Uh, there was a time where I really preferred Wolfenstein 3D to Doom. And I think a lot of that is because I didn't really, again, number one, I didn't really understand how to play these games, and I wasn't particularly good at any of them, but I felt like I made a lot more headway in Wolfenstein, mostly because, like, the enemies were not, like, tanky. They didn't have, like, none of the enemies, even in the later stages, have a lot of health. They have very simplistic patterns. I, of course, would eventually learn that Doom incorporates a lot more strategy and that there are ways to work around those patterns and such. But before that, I really felt like Wolfenstein 3D was the better game, or at least my preferred game. Now in 2025, in hindsight, having really played these games a great deal, and now being able to like play Doom on the higher difficulty levels, and still being very bad at Wolfenstein, I was wrong. Doom is a much better game than Wolfenstein, and in fact, I think Wolfenstein, like, once you kind of like play and understand Doom a little bit better, Wolfenstein feels very clunky and very much more of a first time developer, which is a weird thing to say because like by this point, this team has had multiple released games and such. So
I think I was with you as well. There's definitely a point where I think I preferred Wolfenstein over Doom. And it really is for similar reasons where I felt like I was not getting lost as much when I played Wolfenstein. And I felt like I had a fighting chance. Like like Doom felt hard to me. Like I just I don't think I was on the level at the time. And and now, like, learning more about the creation of Doom, and I will say that one of the things that I did enjoy learning is that when they were developing Doom, they had one simple rule for level design, and it was simply it cannot look like Wolfenstein. If it looks like Wolfenstein, then they have made a mistake, and I find that to be one of the more interesting and honestly hilarious parts about the Doom development cycle.
Oh yeah, definitely, and they definitely accomplished that. I mean, number one, the tech just makes, a huge jump. Like part of why Wolfenstein looks so much better than Catacombs 3D is that Catacombs 3D has those EGA graphics, which means that it's very teal, it's very pink, the colors pop and they're really, really good for, that graphical style, but they are still that graphical style. They are still working within those limitations. Wolfenstein 3D, we're on VGA graphics now. We have all kinds of colors that we can do, and that game also looks really, really good, but we can't do true 3D perspective. We can't, there's no real lighting. And probably the biggest quote unquote sin of it, everything is very boxy in Wolfenstein. See, I think it's funny you mentioned getting lost in Doom more than you would in Wolfenstein, because that's how I remember it too. But playing Doom now and playing Wolfenstein now, it's a complete 180. And part of that is because everything looks the same in Wolfenstein. There's like the wood panel rooms and the stone rooms, right? Like that's about all you get. Plus the dead bodies you leave in your wake. That's about all you get in terms of like navigation. Um, and so it's like really easy to just be spending hours, or maybe not hours, but a long time just running around in circles in Wolfenstein. But in Doom, we have actual lighting, and like they use the lighting in Doom to great atmospheric effect. A little bit later on in the podcast, we're going to talk about Doom as a horror game specifically. The 3D lighting in Doom works wonders, and again, like the biggest change from Doom as a technical marvel over Wolfenstein, orthogonal hallways. You can actually have things be at an angle, which does give like the levels this like sense of complexity that Wolfenstein doesn't, but it also lends them to be more unique. It is much easier to build a mental map of the space in your brain
Yes, yes.
than it is in Wolfenstein. So you don't really have that sense of, have I been here before? You generally remember where everything is. At least that's kind of how Doom plays for me now versus Wolfenstein, where it's really hard to remember, am I in the east or am I in the west part of the level? I don't know. Everything looks the freaking same.
Yeah, I feel like after this podcast, after we finish recording, I might like jump back into old Wolfenstein just because I wanna re-experience the uh the boxes and see if I get lost in Wolfenstein now versus like, I feel like I got better at Doom.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that is a worthwhile exercise. But like, I think another thing that's really interesting, like going back to the development of Doom really quickly, is that, at the beginning, there was always this thought that Doom was going to be a much bigger game. Like John Romero as a designer, has a lot of ambition for their games, and this was true of Wolfenstein as well. I don't know if we've talked about this before, Lamont, and you might not know. Did you know that Wolfenstein 3D is technically a remake?
I don't think I did know that.
So there was like in the early PC days, like we're talking like Apple II, in the early 80s when we were babies, basically. There was another game that was called, Castle Wolfenstein, 1981, considered like one of the first, if not very first, stealth video games. And it has the same basic premise. You are a prisoner of war in Nazi Germany. You are being held in a Nazi castle, and you have to escape. And I've tried to play this game. It's a very hard game to play, and not just because, it's old, but because, the technical ability of being able to emulate these old games on modern hardware is very tough. But it is a game that is about, like, stealth. You don't want to be seen when you are sneaking around. You can take Nazi uniforms and wear them and be able to sneak around and such. So, very ambitious game for 1981. You know, when they started development of Wolfenstein 3D, the thought was that this was also going to be a stealth game, that you're going to be able to pick up and move dead bodies. But again, none of that was working out, and the game was a lot more fun if you were just like running around killing Nazis. Same thing with DooM. The original ideas of DooM, and I think this might have actually been more Tom Hall than John Romero, because Tom Hall was the director for both Wolfenstein and DooM. Was this idea that it was going to be more of an RPG, more of like there are 4 different characters that you can pick from. There are, the basic premise was there that a portal to hell has opened up on Mars. One thing I forgot to mention is that this was inspired by John Carmack's custom Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, that themselves were inspired by sort of a fusion of Evil Dead and Alien. So you take Evil Dead, you take Alien, you get DooM. Which, Ma, you've seen these movies. It makes too much sense almost.
Oh, yes, and I also will say that, you're right. Those a lot of those elements, those story elements, that is absolutely Tom Hall.
Yeah, no, Tom Hall absolutely wanted to like beef up the story a bit more. Like, all of these people are Dungeons and Dragons players, and RPGs were a bigger seller on PC than they were on console. And that is to say that there were far less PC players, and people who owned PCs were more the type to play tabletop RPGs, so RPGs were a bigger thing. So it makes sense that Tom Hall would want like to make this like more RPG style version of DooM. Not to mention that both DooM and Wolfenstein were sort of inspired by Ultima Underworld, Ultima's first attempt at doing a first person style game. But John Romero was very much on the side of, no, we just want to keep this like fast paced, kill everything.
One of the things I would like to say that, like, Tom Hall pieces, the more cinematic approach that he wanted, like, starting the game with the 4 soldiers, like, at the table playing cards, that kinda stuff. I think it's interesting that he wanted that much of those story elements so early, and we didn't get those, but, like, and I know, like, I haven't played the new Doom games, that have come out, but having those story elements now as a part of, like, the Doom franchise, I think is kind of a fun throwback to Tom Hall's original visions for like the cinematic approach that ultimately got thrown away.
It's kind of interesting too, because like the new Doom games have so much lore, and I know that like from some of the critiques I was seeing of the Dark Ages, some people are critiquing the fact that they have so much lore. When, very famously John Carmack's take on all this was that like story in an action game is similar to story in a pornography. It's expected to be there, but it doesn't have to be anything.
Yeah, I find that to be such I definitely find that to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. But at the end of the day, like I would say, as someone who really likes story in their video games and such, I would say that they probably took the right approach for the original Doom. And maybe it's something that I wasn't able to appreciate as fully as I am, now as a game developer who's able to like kind of look at what these games did and reflect on them better. No, I think they made the right call in the end. who really knows what that other version of Doom would have looked like, but it wouldn't have been Doom. And as we know, Doom kind of set the world on fire, not just in terms of sales, but just also in terms of like influence other game developers and such. I mean, we already mentioned Valve as just like one very particular example, but like, there's a reason why first person shooters for years would be called Doom clones.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's not even going into, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but like the multiplayer aspect of it, like coining the death match.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because that, again, very early thing that wasn't there yet, which, yeah, we'll definitely have to, like, kind of touch on id's legacy a little bit later on in terms of, like, coining so many things and starting so many things. Some good, like multiplayer death matches, some bad, like Crunch in the video game industry. Um, but I think, we've talked a little bit about, like, what Doom was going to be. We've talked a little bit about the tech side of things. I think now is a good time to kind of start talking a little bit about what Doom is and what are like kind of like those individual pieces that just like make it such a revelation of a game. I don't use that term revelation lightly. Again, it's not something that I think I was able to appreciate as a child that I am kind of now in hindsight. Going back to dunking on Wolfenstein, though, probably the first thing that's worth mentioning is the enemies. So Wolfenstein, making a game set in World War II and blasting Nazis, and honestly, like it's kind of hard to believe now, at least for us millennials who grew up with so many World War II shooters in the early 2000s, shooting Nazis and making those like just kind of like an amorphous bad guy, like they're of course they're bad guys, they're Nazis, it's okay to shoot them. That was actually relatively new, and again, like probably should have been more controversial, or you would expect it to be anyway, more controversial than it actually was in 1991, 1992 when Wolfenstein came out. But also these enemies were fairly simplistic. Not simplistic, morally, because, Nazis are, but also because just the behavior of patterns of them was fairly simple. Like they all used this idea of like hit scan, which essentially means that they can shoot you anywhere from the map. So like anytime an enemy in Wolfenstein, whether you can see them on screen or not, takes a shot at you, a dice is rolled to see whether you or not you were hit. And like distance and such and things like that do not matter. So there's no concept of actually being able to step out of the way and avoid an enemy attack. Yeah, and that's number one of what makes like Doom so important, is that like of the 7 enemies that are in the original Doom, a couple of them have hit scan attacks, and those are like the 2 undead soldiers, the ones that kind of most resemble the Nazis from Wolfenstein. But all the other enemies in the game have projectile attacks that you can move out of the way and dodge. And, Doom's setup, although like sometimes, it's hard to remember, there was a time period where you could play, when you had to play Doom, you were playing it on your, number one, on your keyboard, no analog sticks. Number 2, you were not doing WASD. That wasn't a thing yet. You used the arrow keys. You might be lucky and have a mouse. So movement was a little bit more rigid than you might expect if you're coming into this as like a modern FPS shooter. But like the concept of actually being able to like strafe around enemies and then counter their attacks, that was new with Doom. Which again, like I think that's something that, like we're going to talk about a lot of things that often gets brought up with Doom. That's one I don't hear about as much, as just being able to like circle strafe around an enemy and, avoid an attack while still attacking them at the same time. But that's such an important part of the game, beyond the fact that also each enemy has behaviors and patterns that make them unique individuals. The designs in Wolfenstein aren't, they're not the worst. They're very distinctive. You have your grunts in the brown suits of the stormtroopers. You've got the SS soldiers in blue that have slightly faster shots, and you have the zombies with the chain guns that I mentioned before grafted on and such. The dogs, obviously, but nothing in Wolfenstein is as iconic as the Pinky, the Imp, the Baron from Hell. Like if you have any familiarity with these games at all, it's like already like conjuring those images to you. Good time for me to pause really quickly. I'm going to ask you, Lamont, what's your favorite Doom demon?
Instinctively, I was gonna say the pinky one. Let me give this a quick look.
And I'm gonna limit this right now to the original Doom. We can look at the added demons in Doom 2 a little bit later.
Yeah, no, let's see, let's see. Oh man, this is messing with me. The one that is like a weird pink horned, looks like chewed gum guy.
Oh, that might be Chewed Gum Guy. Chewed Gum Guy.
Look, he looks like,
what?
I'm gonna show you. This man it is Pinky. Pinky looks like chewed gum to me.
So like the pinker bull demon.
He looks like he looks like chewed bubble gum.
So I can say that all of the sprites in the game are claymation models that have been digitized down.
I do know that, which I think is incredible.
And I'm going to guess that they probably did not make it with chewing gum.
They did not.
I kind of see it. I was always a fan of the Cacodemon myself.
Yes, I see him.
The Cacodemon is like the big floaty one with the one eye, kind of a beholder type monster. And thinking about it now, the fact that like all of the Doom guys were big D&D people, it's actually entirely possible it's supposed to be a beholder.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they go by Cacodemons.
I know I once again keep going on these tangents, but back when I was playing, back when I got introduced to Doom, I had never played D&D.
Me
So
either. Yeah.
so like now, really playing and enjoying D&D, like I see the inspiration and I'm like, "Oh, I get it." Now some of this is not like going right over my head. I'm like, I'm in the know.
Number one, really interesting to think of this as a direct Dungeons and Dragons inspiration. Like Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is like one of those games that's just so deeply embedded to all video games. We sometimes forget it, but usually it's very tangential. Not in Doom's case. Doom is one of those that's like very directly inspired by it, literally inspired by D&D campaigns. I will say I had on this topic of the enemies in Doom and the personality that they add to the game. One of the other big inspirations is Pac-Man. Pac-Man was a big inspiration on the creation of the monsters and their behavioral patterns. And, the first time I mentioned that in the Drexel version of my history class, I had a student who was just like completely baffled by the idea that Doom would have like a direct Pac-Man inspiration, right? But Pac-Man very famously, and it actually would be fun. We have something on the docket we're gonna do someday, which is like we're gonna just cover a whole bunch of retro horror games and games that are like not quite horror or games that have horror elements, even if they're not horror themselves. Pac-Man's on my list because the ghosts in Pac-Man might just be palette swaps of one another, but they all do have different personalities.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and those personalities only come through their behaviors. The red ghost is always behind Pac-Man. The pink one is kind of like around the periphery, trying to do like a pincer with the red one. The blue one is just kind of like floating about like the edges of the map, which kind of limits the space that Pac-Man is able to go to. And then finally you have the orange one, which is very shy, tries to get towards Pac-Man, but then runs away. And all of these enemies, not just these very distinctive looks in Doom, but they all have very particular attacks types and attack patterns. The bull demon Pinky rushes at you and tries to bite your face off, but doesn't have any kind of projectile attack. The imp is a little bit faster than any of the other projectile throwing monsters and will do like melee if you're within range, but mostly just kind of like hangs around and throws fireballs, whereas like the knights and the barons they also throw fireballs and are kind of like the imps, except they're a lot more aggressive. They're a lot more in your face. They will try to get you. And then on top of all of this, if the enemies get attacked by any of the other enemies around them, there's a chance that they will start fighting each other, which is always fun. It's incredible. It's fun to look at, and also it's another one of those ways where the game kind of like relieves pressure from the player. And that's something that Pac-Man does. Like in the earlier stages of Pac-Man, after every few seconds, the ghosts will stop doing their chasing patterns and they'll go to their corners. And it's still that very much that same idea of like sometimes the player is getting pressure put upon them, and then sometimes these monsters will just like start like causing chaos and start fighting each other, and that gives you just a little bit of room to breathe, which is good because, you know, I was going to talk about this more, and when I was going to talk about like Doom as a horror game in particular, it is very, very easy if you are not paying attention to go from full health and all of the ammo into the world to, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I'm going to die in one more hit and I don't have bullets for the weapon I need.
That is a pressure game.
No, it absolutely is. It's totally a game about pressure and just laying down bullets as much as you can, which then comes to the other aspect of Doom that is very heavily RPG inspired, which is that different enemies have different strengths and weaknesses to the weapons that you have. Not necessarily in the case of like this weapon does more damage to this guy and a different weapon is more resistant to that one. They all generally do about the same amount of damage and such. There's damage calculation and such. It's not like super consistent, but so for example, we were talking about the bull demon. The bull demon just rushes at you, right? And the shotgun has a little bit of reload speed. So you will go to like shoot a pinky that's like relatively close to you, and before you have a chance to fire off another shot, the pinky's probably already in your face and doing damage. Whereas if you were using the chain gun, you will probably you'll be peppering them with bullets that do a lot less health in terms of damage, but because you're peppering the monster, it's going to get stunned much more easily. It's going to have a harder time getting to you, and you'll probably kill it before it gets within range of you. And this is, you know, conversely, the knight are able to, one, throw projectiles at you, and two, they're not going to be stunned as much from the chain gun, but they're also much slower than the pinky, so you're much better just like firing off a shotgun round and then circle strafing out of the way before they can like throw a fireball at you, than trying to like chain gun them and then getting a fireball in your face because the chain gun isn't doing as much damage. So in that way, you have to like think about what weapon I'm going to use, where I'm going to be standing at any particular point, what enemies are in the room, and you're making all of these decisions in your brain within milliseconds of each other without ever realizing it. At least like once you start to kind of like start to get the vibe of Doom, right? And that is so much more sophisticated than anything that was happening in Wolfenstein 3D or any of these games' contemporaries back then. And like once you kind of like start to get that vibe of Doom, like suddenly like it is very easy to just kind of like fall into like this kind of maybe zen is a little bit too big of a statement, but definitely a sort of a flow state where you're just kind of shifting between your weapons, firing off bullets, running around in circles, just trying to avoid everything. And like, again, not even thinking about the decisions you're making, but yeah, it's just, when I say that Doom is a revelation, that's what I mean. Like, there hadn't been a game quite of that level of sophistication, particularly again with 3D games, which we talked about in our Alone in the Dark episode. 3D at this era of PC was relatively new and usually not this fast of gameplay.
Definitely not.
I think it's worth mentioning at this point, though, that like the most recent release of the original Doom that's on Steam comes in a pack of, technically two. It's both Doom 1 and Doom 2. You can get it for like $5. But it's not just Doom 1 and 2, it's all of the mods. It's all of the expansions that have been released, including some new expansions with levels from John Romero. Um, and the game runs at 4K resolution at 60 FPS or higher, and you're using a controller that's got two analog sticks. And boy, like this is one of those games that like scales to the modern era of games very, very well. I think sometimes, like I mentioned before, it's easy to forget that like originally like we didn't do WASD. It wasn't easy to like look around with the mouse as it is, as it is now. Um, and also our computers, even good computers, definitely did not run this game at 60 FPS in the best of occasions. I was gonna say, Lamont, do you remember like I obviously you weren't like running fraps or anything, but like I'm curious if like you remember how the game actually ran on Keith's computer in 95, 96, whenever it was.
I mean, I don't, I'm gonna be honest, but, like, I remember early PC gaming. Like, I remember disc-based games. We weren't running at 60 FPS.
Yeah, no, again, even under the best conditions for the time period. So like I think that might contribute a little bit to me not being very good at Doom. There again, now if I pick it up and I'm playing the Doom 1 and 2 pack that Bethesda put out on my Steam Deck or on my Switch, because I have it on both, yeah, like, and it runs beautifully on both of those systems. Like I think that might contribute a little bit, but like I will say playing it like that really like you kind of understand what they were trying to do with this game, and maybe why like so many people were addicted to it, and also why so many people tried to make their own version of Doom. Or in id Software's case, we mentioned Heretic and Hexen earlier, like letting Raven Software, hey, work with us, use the Doom engine and make your own game, right? It's also, I think, at this point, also worth mentioning that like Doom, also with its engine, was released basically like with the ability to make your own levels, open up all of the textures very easily, and just make your own Doom level, which people certainly did. Lamont, without looking it up, I'm looking at a list right now. Well, and I've got like up to 2015, which is already pretty big. How many Doom wads do you think there are?
Let's go a crazy number and say 5,000.
Yeah, from so again, like I'm like this is something that's in debate. A lot of people like kind of like being like, well, okay, this is on this site and on this archive and this many, but I'm seeing estimates anywhere from like 17,000 to 150,000.
Insane.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, people have been, like, making mods for this game literally since it came out and are still continuing to do it to this day, including John Romero. John Romero streams making Doom levels sometimes.
I heard about that. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, so like obviously like a long history of this and legacy of Doom is these WADs. And I will say I haven't really like at least since like 96, 97, I really haven't done anything with Doom WADs. So I'm really not one to like speak on like the legacy of these WADs, how many are out there. That might be a fun thing for our podcast to do someday as we grow, is just maybe like find some WADs out there and also maybe like revisit Doom one day and talk about more of the modding scene. But I think it is worth just like mentioning at this point, just like again, when we're talking about like Doom in terms of the cultural impact and just how big this game was, just mentioning that like people have just gone crazy with making different levels. I think that's like absolutely something worth touching on, especially again, like such the obscene numbers that I'm seeing, how many watts could possibly be out there floating around the internet.
Also want to say that, like, when we talk about the legacy of Doom and the fact that, like, it had such a robust modding scene and, like, truly, how many what the modding scene looked like before Doom, but I can certainly say that after Doom, um, a lot of amazing games, franchises, things like that came out of that scene. I think about, like, your Team Fortresses and definitely games like that started off as mods and have become things of their own and have started their own clones and genres and stuff like that. And I wonder if we would still be in that same place without something like Doom.
Yeah, I mean, like, I will say PC games have a very long history of having mod scenes and having mod community. Doom was like one of the first I remember being as accessible as it was. Much more work to do like a full conversion. And I think that like that level of accessibility, I think, plays a big part in it too. Because again, like mods aren't anything new; they literally as old as PC games, period. But just the fact that like id Software was so open to it and was just like, yeah, go nuts. Here's a tool, make your own levels. It's fine. I think that plays a large role in it too. So another question for you, Mont, is you mentioned you have the final Doom on PlayStation. I was curious, would you say that that is your most played version of Doom? And what versions of Doom have you played?
I don't even know if I could say that it is my most played version of Doom because I don't remember how I got the copy of Doom that I got. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I know that I have it. I run into it every once in a while. It never had a case, and I almost feel like I stole it by accident. I know I played it, but I would tell you that probably playing it on PC, um, is gonna be, like, my most played version of it, and that is just, like, kind of over the
That's
years.
interesting. So I would say my answer is definitely Doom 64. I had a copy of Doom 64. It was actually my mom's boyfriends at the time who owned it, and it's interesting because I almost wonder if Doom 64 is worth its own episode of this podcast simply because it is an original game. It's completely original levels. It has a completely different vibe. The music is completely different. We didn't even talk about the music of the original Doom,
We absolutely have not.
which are all these like metal bangers um from Robert Prince that are very good. They're also like very heavily influenced by bands like Slayers and Pantera, and I'm using the word influence here very strongly, quote unquote. You can definitely hear the influence in those songs. But Doom 64 was done by Aubrey Hodges, who went a completely different route with this like very industrial, much darker, much more horror vibe. That actually, Lamont, that copy of Final Doom you have on PlayStation is, if I'm remembering my versions right, because there are so many different versions of Doom, is essentially the original Doom using the graphics and music and soundscape from Doom 64. So you get the more horror vibe in the original Doom game, whereas Doom 64 is all completely different maps.
Well, and I feel like, kinda getting into Doom 64, not getting too far into it, but I think that that difference in vibe and all of the elements from Doom 64 are a part of, like, the new lore. That's part of, like, where the new trilogy of Doom comes from. Like that's their root. They're rooted in the Doom 64 version of Doom, and that's where the background and the lore and like was it the 2016 game picks up where that game leaves off.
Yeah, to be 100% clear, Doom 2016 kinda sorta technically, and again, like it's Doom, so you take the story or you leave it. Is treated like it is Doom 4, and that Doom 64 is the true Doom 3, and Doom 3 didn't happen, which I think is hilarious. I wasn't going to talk about Doom 3 too much on today's podcast. We might cover it separately someday. I don't have that much experience with it, mostly because I did not have a computer that ran it. back in the day, and I didn't have an Xbox, though I hear that Xbox version of Doom 3 isn't great. But it is really funny how, like, in terms of legacy, Doom 64 I remember, and I didn't do enough research into this because I was only going to briefly touch on 64 today. But in my mind, the 64 version like reviewed very averagely. It just kind of had average reviews and was just kind of like, well, here's a thing on a system that, very few people bought. And if you want a version of Doom, it's here, but it's different and it's kind of weird. But in terms of legacy, Doom 64 is kind of like lived on as this like classic thing. And I think that mostly just kind of comes down to the vibes of it. Even like in terms of the level design, it's much more puzzle heavy. Some of the puzzles are a little bit more surreal. There's a really interesting one fairly early in the game where like one of the keys, because like Doom brings keys back from Catacombs 3D, which makes the levels feel a little bit more Lays-like. And Doom 64 has this one puzzle where there's a key that's like on a pillar, and you go to touch it, and it like slowly fades away, like it's a hologram, and then it starts like fading between these different pillars, and you kind of have to catch it. That's just like one puzzle of many that gives Doom 64 this more surrealist vibe on top of just feeling much more like a claustrophobic horror game. And I think it's like reasons like that Doom 64 is kind of has like this like bigger legacy than some of the later Doom follow-ups that 2016 like absolutely references it and treats it like the real Doom 3, which is a thing. I bring it up mostly, Mont, because as I said, Doom has been ported so many times, and it is, honest to God, so hard to keep track of all of the different changes and all of the things that make the different versions unique. Like, no two, outside of just like modern console ports today, no two versions of Doom are alike. I'm not going to go into all of them. I don't have that all memorized in my brain. I will post a link in the show notes to some of the videos from Stop Skeletons from Fighting. Uncle Derek over there has done extensive videos covering every single port of Doom and also going into the history of some of them. The 3DO version in particular is the only one. It's the only Doom port that has actors and full motion video, or at least it was going to. I think if I'm remembering correctly, the full motion video sequences did not make it into the final game, and there's a whole story surrounding that. Really, really fascinating. Stop Skeletons Fighting has a whole documentary on the 3DO port of Doom. It's like the Super Nintendo version using the Super FX chip. Not just the Super FX chip, the Super FX2 chip, in order to be able to like do the proper like scaling and rotation and all of those things that are needed to like make those levels and sprites work. Is super blurry. You can't see anything. Has pretty good music. Music's okay, but like the game is just looks like the pixels were just like jumbled and smeared around. It just comes down to the fact that like again, consoles are designed, especially like consoles from the 90s and 80s, were designed to do one thing and do one thing only, and that's play video games, right? And to make a video game work on a computer like what Doom's doing, you have to do all kinds of weird computer wizardry to make it work. And we already kind of established John Carmack was very, very good at that. And what it really just kind of comes down to is that like if you're going to like take those games and put them on a console that are designed very differently from your home consumer PC, there's going to be concessions. And, again, so like you kind of had like pick and choose, right? Did you get the version where the graphics are actually playable, but the music is going to grate your ears? Or do you get the version where, again, it just kind of like the music is great, but they like smeared all the pixels around?
I mean, I'm gonna pick the smeared graphics personally. There, I don't know.
The fact that there are so many ports of Doom is also in part where the joke of Doom runs on everything came from. Lamont, are you familiar with this particular meme?
Oh my god, yes, because like Doom on refrigerators.
Yeah, we got Doom running on refrigerators. Someone like got Doom running on an LCD pregnancy test. My personal favorite currently, because limited run is limited run, recently did a re-release of the PC game that includes a box that has a screen on it, so you can play Doom on the box for Doom.
That's insane.
Yeah, and then, like, the funny thing is that, like, again, Doom was actually, I mentioned that, like, Doom doesn't, like, run all that great on the original PCs and such, but it still ran pretty good, all things considered. Like, for the kind of game that it was very impressive for its time. Um, Doom was always a very well optimized game, so, like, I'm not like, I guess that's part of, like, where the joke of, like, Doom runs on everything came from, as opposed to, like, Crisis, which got the opposite reputation. But point is, there's a lot of different versions of Doom.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like, that really is it speaks volumes for, like, how tight that programming is, like, just how well done and optimized it is that you can get Doom to run on quite literally anything is kind of amazing.
But generally speaking, lots of Doom ports. Highly recommend just watch watch all of Derek's videos on Stop Skeletons from Fighting. Honestly, the ports of Doom are just like very fascinating, and just how different they are all from each other. Like, there is just no, until again recently, where the PC game was easy to port to modern systems and such. There's just like no consistency among all of them, and it's kind of hilarious. You have
Yes.
you ever read any of the Doom novels?
So, I first off, I need to make it known that I did not know there were Doom novels. Like, this was news to me. So, I can tell you with, like, my entire chest, no, I have never read any of the Doom novels.
I read two of them. There are four in total. They are interesting. I think like the thing that everyone remembers about them is that it's the only media that ever gave Doom Guy a name, which is Flynn Taggart, which is actually referenced in the newer Doom trilogy. I don't think it's officially his name in the newer Doom trilogy, but it's referenced several times, because it's funny, more than anything else. Um, I will tell you my memory, and again, I haven't read these books since like 97, 98. They are from 1995. Both adaptations. One of is an adaptation of Doom 1, which is about the Flynn Taggart, I guess, going through the Mars station, finding the portal to hell, and then trying to fight out of hell, and then the demons come to Earth. And what I remember of Hell on Earth, the second book, is that it very much feels like Mormon take on Stephen King's The Stand. I've only ever watched the Stand miniseries. I'm not as familiar with the book, but it's a Stephen King book. There's definitely some references at the very least to Christianity, whereas this is very much like written from the Mormon perspective. Like, there's a lot of Mormon lore to try to explain like why there are demons and how these demons are coming to hell, and like they tie it into prophecy, which I do not know enough about Mormonism to tell how much is like actually taken from true Mormon canon versus like what's made up from the book. But the book is very explicitly from a Mormon perspective, which in and of itself is very strange.
That sounds
Yeah,
very
and
strange.
to be clear, just in case there's anybody of the Mormon faith listening, not because explicitly because Mormonism is strange or anything, but because like taking like Doom, a video game that is trying very hard to not take itself seriously. Like, I think in like one of the endings of either Doom 1 or Doom 2, you are like also getting revenge because they killed your bunny rabbit, which is also referenced in the 2016 games. to like really like take like some like serious like hardcore religious canon and try to like mix it into these games. That's what's very weird about it.
Yeah, that is definitely strange. Yeah, I kind of want to now. I kind of want to dive a little bit more into these books, just because like I I do know a bit about Mormonism. So like I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like there's been parts of me that have been wanting to like revisit these novels just to like remember how strange they were. But like at the same time, I'm like, I've got other things to do with my life. You know? I could always just like reread the Doom comic 100 times. Lamont, did you ever read the Doom comic book?
Also, did not realize there was a comic book. I'm not surprised there's a comic book, but I did not realize that that was a thing.
Yeah, and like I don't know if they've made any more because I could imagine that there have been more comics like now that Doom is like culturally relevant again, but I'm very specifically like referring to the 1996 16-page one-off that is very famously remembered for exactly one panel, which is where the Doom guy just like is looking at a cyber demon and yelling tear, rip and tear your guts. You are huge. That means you have huge guts. Rip and tear.
Oh, okay.
Also referenced again quite a bit in the 2016 video game, because of course it is. Lamont, because you haven't actually like read this comic, I want you to know it is much more strange than even that one panel like kind of shows. Yeah, like for the most part, it is basically just like Doom guy, like just like shouting things like this. But then like there's one part where he gets like really solemn about how we destroyed the Earth due to climate change. It is a deeply, deeply strange book.
Yes. Also, Doom Guy has a huge neck.
I like to believe that he has a huge neck in all iterations. Like I just imagine the Doom guy is this like force of nature more than anything else. And I know that that's probably a lot of the 2016 games lore coming out there, but there is other lore. Like we'll get back to looking at other Doom media in a second, but there is other lore out there that I think they added like posthumously. Like people at id just kind of decided that the Doom guy is the great grandson of BJ Blazkowicz from Wolfenstein.
But yes, I do know that that's supposed to be a thing,
And BJ Wolfenstein, in turn, is the grandfather of Commander Keen.
and I did not know that part.
Yeah, so like all the big three id games are all like tied together like that.
I think that's fun.
Did you watch? Go ahead.
I I was just about to say now, I also need you to know that I thought about watching the Doom movie, and then I realized that I had better things to do.
I mean, come on. Is there ever anything better than like watching like a 3.7 rate? That's actually higher than I would have expected. This is the Google ratings, not Rotten Tomatoes. 2005. So like, it's funny because like the Doom movie is like very clearly more a movie about Doom 3 than it is Doom. Like it comes out like a couple years after Doom 3. The aesthetic feels very Doom 3. Lamont, I didn't watch this movie either. I've never watched this movie. The only thing I remember is people talking about how there's a moment where the camera goes first person.
I remember hearing about that as well. I think when this movie came out, I was I was deeply in the I am tired of The Rock being in things phase. Like I was just like, man, like I realized at that point that The Rock as an actor was overrated, and I just could
That's
not.
that's really interesting to me because Doom is really the first movie where I remember him as being an actor. How must you feel now?
I feel absolutely justified. I am still absolutely over The Rock. I am so tired of him, and
I
like
Go
we
ahead.
don't. I was gonna say I don't know if you want me to go too deep into it, but I will say that like I feel like um his early success created a monster, and now like a lot of the stuff that he touches just it doesn't land.
I'll say, like, from my perspective, like I said, I didn't really like think of The Rock as an actor. He was just that person who like started a bunch of like really annoying wrestling catchphrases, which me, someone who was not watching wrestling in the Attitude Era, got so freaking sick of because everybody freaking quoted him and I just wanted them to stop.
I was that guy. I was watching wrestling in the Attitude Era. I quoted The Rock. Like I was following his career from like the Rocky Sucks days to like, The Rock as an actor, and like that's why like at this point when Doom came out and I was already done with him, like I I I I, I followed him. I rooted for him, and then I was just like, nope, hard no. And when I hard noed, I was right.
I
And I
guess
know
like the thing.
that I was gonna say, I know that's my like controversial opinion, but I definitely feel like, you know, uh his antics when it came to like Black Adam, um, really was kind of the final nail in the coffin, where he got too big and he felt like he had too much power and he was calling shots outside of his
Yeah,
ring.
sure, but that movie was like 15 years later. You-
Oh
You're saying
yeah,
you were already sick of him in Doom, where, like I said, like for me, that was like when I was like, "Oh, he's an actor now? What? Okay, sure." Like, I don't remember what the first movie I ever saw with him was like, and I know, like even in recent
probably the
years, like
Scorpion King.
I've heard that Jumanji movie is supposed to be pretty good. I'm gonna tell you though, Lamont, I've actually never seen any Mummy movie, not including the Scorpion King.
Now that surprises me a little more.
Yeah, no, it seems like something I would have watched or engaged with at some point, and I've not watched any of those movies. But yeah, with like Doom 2003, like I didn't watch it just because like the opportunity never arose, and like I just haven't really like I at some point really want to try and watch as many video game movies and video game adaptations as I can, just out of general interest of adaptations. I've joked with you before about doing a different video game movie podcast at some point, but I just haven't brought myself to watch this one yet. Nothing to do with The Rock or anything like that. I just have never worked up the will or interest. Maybe I will. Maybe I will tonight. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm going to interrupt one more time and say what's really weird is looking at the release date of the Doom movie. I think we had planned on watching it, but that was the first month that we moved into the
Oh,
apartment.
interesting. And I have completely no memory of that. That's really funny that we just we just didn't do it.
'Cause yeah, it was October of 2005 was when that movie came out, and that was the same month and year that we became roommates.
Yeah, it makes sense, and we definitely have a habit of, like, going to go see movies, especially, like, movies that are, like, maybe adapted from stuff we haven't seen. So I haven't seen Doom 2005. I did watch Doom Annihilation, the Netflix exclusive 2019 movie.
I knew about Annihilation.
I have no memory of anything that happened in this movie because it was so goddamn boring. I was not falling asleep, but I was having trouble paying attention because I was just so bored. Which, Lamont, for me, that's the cardinal sin of anything. Like, you can be bad, you can be weird and strange and incomprehensible, but the worst thing you can absolutely be is boring, and that is exactly what Doom Annihilation was. I guarantee you, regardless of any actors or anything, and no shade to any of the actors in this movie, it happens sometimes. I would have been better off watching the Rock movie. I haven't seen the Rock movie yet, and I can say wholeheartedly, with my entire chest, the Doom 2005 movie would have been less of a waste of time than Annihilation was.
I'm gonna believe you. I'm looking at the cover art and I am already just thoroughly done.
Like, I looked at the cover and I almost fell asleep immediately. I will say something really funny though that I did not know just now.
I'm listening.
I'm looking at this cast, and there is a character named there's an actress in this movie. The actress is Lorena Komburova. I don't know anything about her. She might have been in something else I've seen before. Obviously, like, this is a movie that has like a cast of like not like AAA actors or anything. That's totally fine. No shade to any of these actors. However, like, I am noticing that this person played a character in Doom Annihilation named Sandy Peterson, one of the developers on Doom, who is not a woman.
That is fascinating.
I
Oh, that's
really would
funny.
love to know what led to that happening. Yeah, Sandy Peterson is also a very interesting part of this story. I was going to bring it up a little bit later, but like this feels like a good time to bring it up. So, we didn't really touch on this, but like Doom is also very well known for just having really good level design. And one of the most interesting things about it is that, like, if you're a real Doom head, which I am not, but I did start to get the vibe of this playing so much Doom, getting prepared for this podcast, is that this was one of the first games that had credited level designers, which is not to say that there weren't people whose dedicated job was level design before Doom. It's just the first time that I know of anyway, where people were credited for that job. One of those people is Sandy Peterson. And in the first game, not excluding the fourth episode that was added to the Ultimate Doom, Thy Flesh Consumed, the level designers for the original Doom are John Romero, Sandy Peterson, and Sean C. Green. You can, once you start to know like who designed a particular level, you start to see a vibe. You start to understand like a style, and it gets to the point where like you're playing a level and you'll be like, yeah, this is a John Romero level. This is a Sandy Peterson level. If you're playing like one of the later games, this is an American Ski
Yeah.
level, right? You start to get a vibe for like that person's particular level design philosophy. They're kind of coming in a little bit differently, you know. And in a lot of these cases, some people have their favorites. Such, I'm gonna be very basic and say John Romero's levels are the best. They're like easily. And again, no shade to anybody else. So Sandy Peterson has kind of gotten like a little bit infamous on the internet recently because like on Twitter, they would say something about the history of Doom. Like they would just be like, "Oh, I'm going to tell this fun or interesting story," and then John Romero would reply and correct them.
Oh, that's too funny.
And this happened multiple times throughout the last couple years. So I've got one opened on Reddit here where Sandy Peterson is saying, "Okay, looky here, whippersnapper. I wrote the original Doom backstory. First off, it's not genocide to blow demons back to hell. Second, well, I got nothing else." John Romero responds, "Hi, Sandy. I hope you're doing well. However, you are incorrect. That Tom Hall wrote the story for Doom long before you joined id September 1993, 9 months into production. Summarizing Tom's story in 2 sentences does not equal writing the Doom story, not by a long shot."
That is amazing.
Oh, wow. So, like, that tweet I just read was from 2025. That was from this past February. I'm now I'm now going to read an example from 2021, 4 years before that tweet. Sandy Peterson says, "In 1993, we gave away 1/3 of Doom for free the first episode. We sold 100,000 copies. Millions were pirated. In 1995, Doom 2 was a normal box product. Nothing innovative nor free. We sold over 1 million copies, and I built my house." John Romero. "Hi, Sandy. Hope you're doing well. The sales of registered Doom in 1994 were significantly more than 100,000. Just wanted you to know." Sandy Peterson. "Doom 2 was a quickie cash grab to use some assets from the first game and give the designer something to do while Quake was being built. So when I complain Doom 2, please know that I am fully aware Quake was well worth it." John Romero. "Doom 2 followed a long pattern of id development. It was a retail sequel to our previous game, just like Spear of Destiny was a retail for release for Wolf 3D. Same with our Keen games. It wasn't a crash grab or something to keep us busy." So like this is something that's been happening over like again from what I can see 4 years now of just this back and forth of
Sandy just has a weird alternate history.
it's like Sandy Peterson just has something to say. Yeah, so this depends on your familiarity with the magazine ad that it's a mock-up of. Okay, so I'll show you the original image, but like obviously this is like making fun of like John Romero constantly going like, "Hi Sandy, hope you're doing well."
Oh, that's funny. Okay, yeah, that's funny.
So let me get the actual ad that it's a for like the lead up to Daikatana.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I actually remember this.
John Romero's about to make you his bitch, which according to John Romero's version of the story is that Daikatana was in development. John Romero kind of gotten this like rock star video game developer reputation at the time, and Eidos, the publisher, really wanted to capitalize on it. And the hilarious part is then this ad was out before Daikatana was out, and then Daikatana came out, and no one liked it. Someone liked it, I'm sure.
And it's funny because like listening to Romero's GDC talk, he talks about Daikatana a little and how like it was definitely a failure, but it for him it was that he was able to get a lot of these uh game designers who are modders who had never made games before and help them. Like he was able to build a team, teach them how to make a game, and even though it didn't come out the way that he was hoping, it gave people who are new to the industry a shot in a game that got published ultimately. And maybe that's a post-mortem like fluff thing, but I think even if, even if that's how he spun it later, there's still truth in that, is that the game industry is hard to get into, especially at that time, and like to be able to, to make a game with John Romero and, you know, you were modding games. You were doing it for free and it was a passion project. And now you're part of something and you're getting paid and it is published. And, even if it critically failed, it's still a wonderful resume
Yeah, for
piece.
sure. I think that is a good legacy takeaway from Daikatana, and it's interesting just because in my game history class, of course, we covered DooM, and we talk a lot about John Romero, John Carmack as individuals, and the things that like kind of made them tick a little bit, as well as like other people on the DooM team, But we kind of get into their heads a little bit about important part for me for teaching game history is just like getting across that the people who make games are bringing themselves, putting their personality and their life experiences into these games because I want the students who are also game development students to like think of games as pieces of culture, maybe even art if I can use that word. And one of the last things I show in the class is a really great fan letter. I have a link here. It's going to be in the show notes. It is in German, unfortunately, but the letter is in English. It's a letter that John Romero sent to Jordan Mechner when he was, I believe, 17 going on 18, as he says in the letter. So, this is a horror game podcast, but so just really quickly, Jordan Mechner, creator of games such as Karateka and most famously Prince of Persia. Really, really fascinating story, really interesting stuff all around for both Karateka and Prince of Persia. Particularly if you watched our Alone in the Dark episode, Karateka and Prince of Persia have a lot of crossover development of Alone in the Dark. So go listen to that podcast. But this letter that John Romero sent in March 24th, 1985 is so fascinating because like this is a 17-year-old kid who has released video games at this point, like not working at, John Romero going to get started at Origin Software working on Ultima 3 before going to Softdisk and then eventually starting id Software. But like sent this like really like exorbitant fan letter to Jordan Mechner, and it's hilarious, especially if you've read Masters of Doom. I'm gonna keep pushing Masters of Doom on people. I'm gonna keep pushing it on you, Lamont. You should totally read that book. I think you'd have a blast with it.
Definitely should.
But you can you read something like Master of Doom, and you start to kind of really understand John Romero's personality, or at least like the personality that like people understand John Romero to have. And then you read a letter like this, and you can almost like, even if you've never listened to him talk, you can like almost hear his voice reading this letter, just asking things like, I too am a game programmer. For what I saw on the screen, I deduced most of the technique used in drawing the graphics. Here are my conclusions. You had to use page flipping. Shapes were OR'd on the screen. For the most part, where the karateka went halfway through a door, you adjusted the horizontal drawing ring. For the scrolling background, you tell me. And that like scrolling background one sticks out to me because, Commander Keen and the fast scrolling of Wolfenstein and Doom, John Carmack did those, but John Carmack did them, in a partnership with John Romero. So that like point that you made and that like Romero made about like Daikatana being Romero's opportunity to give a lot of like people's first time experiences working on a game, you read something like this and you just kind of remember that like, games aren't made in a vacuum. They're made by people. And like, John Romero here, very inspired by Jordan Mechner. Like he literally signs the letter, John Romero, disciple of the great Jordan and worshiper of the magnificent Mechner. And then like in parentheses, how's that sound? Because he's 17.
Amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
No, I like this letter, which is I have a link to it that'll be in the show notes, but like I came across it because of the making of Karateka, the virtual documentary that Digital Eclipse put out. It was my first time ever reading this letter, and I honestly think that this is very profound. Personally, like actually like seeing in real time like two who are now like such big names like of historical importance, two big creators in our industry being in one being inspired by the other and then going on to have the biggest career, a game that like we said at the beginning of this podcast launched so many things. Like there are weird Doom clones out there. My personal favorite is Redneck Rampage. What's yours? But also we wouldn't have Half-Life without Doom. And I don't know what the world looks like without Half-Life. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I find that, that kind of march of history to be really interesting. That's why I, do podcasts like this. That's why I teach game history, because that kind of thing is just, like, very fascinating and very meaningful to me.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know exactly what I was expecting when we went into this episode. But coming out of it, I will say that Doom is a lot more important in the grand scheme of things. Like, and we talk about horror games, but Doom is truly a game history game, and I really enjoyed learning more about, well, not just about Doom, but getting to really dive a little bit more into game history, in a way that we didn't do, uh, when we were in college and when we were learning game design. Like I feel like that's something that maybe we missed out on, that I'm happy that you are doing for new students.
Before we kind of like wrap this up and talk about what we're doing next month, I think that there was a lot more to talk about with Doom because it's such a big game. I feel like we've only kind of really gotten to scratch the surface. I think there's more to talk about, like how Doom 2 kind of follows up from that legacy. I think, it's funny you mentioned like, oh, we're a horror game podcast, and has this whole thing about Doom as a horror game that like I feel like only got kind of touched on the periphery, that we didn't really get a chance to like really truly dive into, which I think that there are things that Doom does to like really try to intensify that. I think, you know, between things like you reach a certain point, you go to like grab a key, and then suddenly like walls open behind you that you didn't realize were doors, and then new monsters flood out, plus monsters in front of you, and suddenly like you're swarmed and you didn't expect it. You know, there's just so much going on with this game, and between it and the mods and then sequels like Doom 3 and the current trilogy, I feel like this is one that we're going to have to just revisit in more depth in the future. But at this point, we've been talking for a long time.
And I completely agree. And there are definitely, talking about those horror elements, talking about like thinking about when the room goes dark, and so you have enemies that you can barely see, you have fireballs coming at you, and like those lighting effects are the only way that you can really see what you're trying to fight. Like that is definitely a tense, scary moment in like such early gaming.
And like, you know, I mentioned earlier, the lighting was like so important. I was playing the game earlier today on ultra violence, which I've never have really done before, and you know, completing a whole episode in ultra violence was really cool. But like, you know, there was a maze where the lights are going in and out and in and out, and they are pulsing. And when I say they go out, I mean like the room goes completely dark, and you are stuck in there with the specters, which are basically bull demons, but they're like partially invisible, and the regular shotgun guys, and it is harrowing to have like the lights go out and then the lights come on, and then suddenly you realize there's someone in front of you, but if I shoot my shotgun here, I am right next to an exploding barrel, and it's going to be very bad. And then they go dark, and then the guy is gone, and it's like, where did they go? You know, just creating that like sense of intensity that like I think more people think of Doom as an action game than a horror game, but you know, it can be both. Action horror is a thing in film too, and that is very clearly what Doom is doing. It's a very good horror game. I think we should probably talk more about it someday in the future. But for now, there are other games to get to. There are other things to talk about. We're hoping to see you next month with another episode. Lamont, should we tell them what we are going to be talking about next time?
You know, Adrian, I think we should, because it is summer, I should tell you that I will see you on the beach.
You will see me on the beach, because next time we are talking about Death Stranding. So we're going like complete opposite. We're going from an older game that some people may have a hard time thinking of as a horror game because of its fast-paced, heavy action, the awesome music, to a much slower, much more contemplative game that also, again, maybe the horror aspect of it seems a little tenuous of a connection at first, but you know, I think we'll go a little bit more deeper into at least why I think this absolutely qualifies as a horror game, and you know, we'll also maybe talk a little bit about its connection to the game that was supposed to come before it and really was the thing that led to its existence. That's PT. So we're not going to do a full PT episode, but we'll definitely talk about some PT. We'll talk about some Silent Hill, but mostly we're going to be talking about Death Stranding.
Thank you, Adrian. And once again, I am Lamont Williams.
I am Adrian Sandoval.
And this is Playing Dread.
You've been listening to Playing Dread, a Q27 media production and a member of the New Jersey Horror Collective, hosted by Lamont Williams and Adrian Sandoval. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends, or just consider leaving us a review and giving us top ranks on your podcast listening service of choice. Check out our show notes at playingdread.libsym.com and consider becoming a Playing Dread patron on Patreon. Social media links including YouTube, Blue Sky, Instagram, and more can be found at www.playingdread.com. All music is under a Creative Commons Attribution license. The intro music is The Curse of the Dolls by Jeff Harvey, and other music in this episode was performed by Alex Grohl, Dimitri Taras, Grand Project, and Pump Up the Mind.
And this was Playing Dread. I almost said Death Stranding.
Do you want to try that again?
Yeah, I do. I was like, why am I trying to say that this podcast is Death Stranding? And this is Playing Dread. Thank you for listening.
You were going to say Death Stranding again, weren't you?
I was.
You can kind of almost hear it, but I think it's fine. I think it's fine.